So it's my great honor to read to you the citation and share with you a little bit about why we thought it was appropriate to recognize one of our own in this way. So here we go. Zachary J. Iscol, class of '97, from the earliest days of your childhood in Pound Ridge, New York, when you listened to your grandfather speak of his combat experiences in World War II, you have been drawn to stories of valor in the face of adversity. Your father, a self-made entrepreneur, and your mother, an educator and activist, further inspired you with their work ethic and their unflagging belief that true fulfillment comes from lifting up others. Luckily for humanity, their DNA and your altruistic drive have merged to create an unstoppable force for good. A self-described late bloomer, what you lacked in physical stature, you seem to have a lot of stature to me, man. But more on that later. As you grew into an adolescent, you made up for in spades with your inquisitive mind, penchant for deep conversation, and burgeoning patriotism. Indeed, Exeter instructors and friends recall a kind of Pied Piper quality about you, a magnetism born of authenticity. Quote, Zach was the kind of kid who was more than liked. He was loved by his fellow students. That's what one emeritus history instructor recalls. Around Exeter's Harkness tables and in Main Street dormitory, Main Street? Main Street! There we go. You found what you've called a real community, and critically for your future endeavors, exposure to diverse cultures and viewpoints. Later at Cornell University, where you studied government and you discovered sprint football and the enlightened mentoring of your coach Terry Cullen, himself a decorated former Marine Corps infantry officer and Vietnam veteran. You have said that more than anything else, it was Coach Cullen's rectitude and encouragement that led you to enter officer candidate school and commit fully to a military career. Initially contracted to become a pilot, you changed course after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001. Your rationale for joining the infantry was indicative of your character. You didn't want to miss an opportunity to be connected to enlisted men at the front lines in the battle against Al-Qaeda. That chance came in June of 2004 when you deployed on your second tour of the Iraq War to Anbar province, then considered one of the most dangerous places on earth. There, as a platoon commander with 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, you were assigned to lead 30 of your own men, plus an additional 250 Iraqi National Guard troops, a task fraught with unprecedented cultural and logistical challenges. With uncommon charisma and tenacity, and a gift for interpersonal connection, you persevered and succeeded. Quote, Zach has extraordinary communication skills and persuades by personal example, unquote, says a former battalion commander. Quote, he knows just what to say and how and when, using body language and affection. People grow brighter around him, end quote. The program of training and integration you developed soon became a model in Anbar province and beyond. Moreover, yours would be the only combined unit to fight on the front lines of the Second Battle of Fallujah, now known as the bloodiest battle in the Iraqi War. For your bravery in combat, you were awarded a Bronze Star Medal, the mark of an American hero. In 2008, after 6.5 years with your beloved Marines, you returned to civilian life and decided to make a film about your experiences in Iraq, writing and directing and producing The Western Front helped you to come to terms with what you have called the paradox of war, that violence begets violence, and that in battle there are seldom any right answers. Your platoon sergeant in Iraq has said, quote, "Zach never steps back." You proved him right. As soon as your film was made, you created Higher Purpose, a business dedicated to helping transitioning service members, veterans, and military spouses find fulfilling careers with top American companies, and now an important component of Lafayette Media Group, your expanding B Corp. Around the same time, you and your Marine comrades began to notice an alarming and painful trend. More and more members of the 3rd Battalion were taking their own lives. With the rate of death by suicide fast approaching the total number of men from that battalion killed in Fallujah, you sprang into action, marshaling both human and financial capital to save your brothers and sisters in arms. Thus was born Headstrong, a nonprofit that has partnered with the Weill Cornell Medical Center to provide comprehensive mental health care programs for post-9/11 military veterans free of cost, stigma, and bureaucracy. The organization's slogan, quote, "healing the hidden wounds of war," end quote, describes the critical work that you and your team are doing to rescue a generation who might otherwise be marginalized or even forgotten. Since its inception in 2012, Headstrong counselors have treated approximately 450 veterans for traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other forms of mental illness, with dozen more veterans reaching out for help each month. Now offering services in 8 cities across the United States, plans are afoot to expand further in both urban and rural areas and to extend care to other at-risk populations, including LGBTQIA youth, victims of domestic violence, and Syrian refugees. Finally, and most importantly, in the midst of this nonstop advocacy, you became an adoring husband to Meredith and the doting father of 3 beautiful children, the consummate family man who understands to the core just how precious time with loved ones is. Zach, for being an ambassador of compassion, an entrepreneur of hope, and the living embodiment of non-sibi. It is an honor to present you today with the 2017 John Phillips Award.
Thank you. Thank you. And well, I thank you for that incredible introduction and kind words, Principal McFarland. Thank you. I've got a few friends from Exeter, from my time at Exeter, that are here today, as well as some of my family members, my dad, my mom, my sister, Paul and Nicole, my wife, and our 3 kids, Eloise, Wolf, and India. And between them, my fellow students that are here, some of my teachers that are here, I'm willing to bet there's some bets as to who's the most surprised that I'm standing up here right now. I think my greatest achievement at Exeter was not getting caught sneaking over to my girlfriend's dorm in the middle of the night. And I was definitely a late bloomer. My mom, who is sitting right here, she can attest to this. She actually sent me a book my lower year called Leo the Late Bloomer, which is about a tiger who is smaller than all the other tigers and waiting to grow. I got cut from the JV water polo team, and I got cut from the JV hockey team. But fortunately, Coach Aronian's son, who is a wonderful classmate of mine, who's no longer with us, along with Mike Kolodner, who's one of my classmates who are here, went to Coach Aronian's house and said, "You can't cut Zach from the hockey team." And so I got put back on the JV hockey team after getting cut because I was that good of a bench warmer. I'm definitely probably the last person in my class anyone would expect to be here. But Exeter really is quite a remarkable place. And I hope that all of you can appreciate that if you're here, this is not only are you incredibly fortunate, but you're one of the luckiest people on earth. There's something special about a place where people come together at a round table from so many different backgrounds. It's a place to listen, argue, let ideas stand on their own merits, challenge each other, and grow from it. And I don't need to tell you how divided the world is today. You know, you take the recent NFL controversy on standing or kneeling for the national anthem. Most people don't know that when Colin Kaepernick first started protesting, he was sitting down, not kneeling. And then he had a conversation with a guy named Nate Boyer, who is a Green Beret, Iraq and Afghanistan veteran, and a lineman for the San Diego Chargers. And Nate Boyer sent him a letter, and he told him that he thought sitting on the bench during the national anthem was disrespectful to the flag, but it was insulting to Nate, it was insulting to his service, to veterans, the people that were lost. And something remarkable happened next. The two of them decided to sit down and have a conversation. And so Colin decided that it was disrespectful to sit, but they agreed it was actually a sign of reverence for the flag to kneel, while also issuing a call for duress for black men in America and making a statement at the same time. And somehow that conversation is still lost in the conversation we're having now, 2 or 3 years later. At Exeter, you have the opportunity every day to have those types of conversations. And those skills, the ability to listen to each other, to respond with mutual respect despite differences of opinion or background, there's no place for straw men around the Harkness table. And I think that honestly, I had some wonderful teachers here. Jack Kearney was one of them. But the most remarkable teachers I had here were my fellow students. So put yourself in situations while you're here that challenge you, challenge the way that you think about the world, and don't wait until you graduate. It'll serve you well in life, and I can tell you that because 20 years after graduating, I can tell you that it served me well in life. It possibly even saved my life. Listening to Wole read the citation, most of what I achieved has really just been because I had the privilege to know some exceptional people and work alongside them. This award is really much more of a tribute to their work than it is to anything that I've done. In 2004, I was put in charge of a combined action platoon, 250 Iraqi soldiers and 30 US Marines. I was a Jewish kid from Westchester County, New York, now in charge of leading Muslim Iraqi soldiers in the most violent part of Iraq. But what informed my success was my first year roommate at Exeter, Aaron Tassar, who was Muslim. I fasted with him over Ramadan. He taught me to say Salam Alaikum. I taught him to say Shalom. And there was Adnan Zulfikar, who was a senior in my dorm. Adnan was just one of the coolest kids on campus. He was charismatic. He took care of the younger kids. No bully would be safe around Adnan. That small window into Islam, so different than the way that Muslims are portrayed in the media, opened the door for me to forge deeper relationships with my Iraqi soldiers and with local religious and tribal leaders. And something remarkable about that is we were never attacked in the town that we lived in because of those relationships. We were attacked outside the town, but those relationships kept us safe. I also had extraordinary Marines who I worked with, men like Sergeant Anthony Alvarado and Corporal Alex Martinez. During the Second Battle of Fallujah, which, as Willie said, was the biggest battle of the Iraq War, Alvarado was wounded on the second day of fighting, and Martinez took over as my platoon sergeant, despite it being a billet for someone with twice his rank. We also lost our translators during that fight. One of them was wounded on the second day of fighting. Another one had to be evacuated for medical issues. And so here we are leading a mixed unit of Iraqi soldiers and U.S. Marines. The Iraqis don't speak English. The Marines don't speak Arabic during 3 weeks of the most high-intensity combat operations of the Iraq War. And I can tell you, translators are kind of important in that situation. But most of my Hispanic Marines, those who grew up in bilingual households, who grew up speaking Spanish, had a propensity for learning languages, and by then were able to operate almost seamlessly despite the language barrier. It was amazing to watch these young Marines in action, kicking down doors, engaging the enemy, and yelling commands in Arabic while leading Iraqi soldiers. To this day, those Marines are my heroes, and I was just fortunate enough to get to work with them. 3 years ago, my media company published an investigative piece about these online anonymous groups that were publishing photos of naked female Marines and soldiers and even girlfriends. If you can even call these folks Marines who were doing it. They were also putting out bounties to get specific photos of specific women, sometimes with hidden cameras or other types of sick means. The article led to investigations. It led to changes, but not enough changes to Marine Corps policy. That article was written by my co-founder, Brian Jones, who was class of 2008 from Exeter. When he graduated from here, he enlisted in the Marines and served in Afghanistan. He received a few death threats. Our director of operations, Katie, also an Iraq vet, actually had people call her threatening to rape her. But watching Brian's reaction to all that hate, none of it mattered, because we knew that we were right and we had stood up for something that we all believed was right. There's an old saying that success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. It's usually interpreted to mean that everyone wants to take credit for something and nobody wants to for success, but nobody wants to take credit for failure. There's another way that I look at it. The times that I've been most successful in life have been when I've had co-founders, or times when I've been a part of a bigger team. The times when I've been least successful are times when I've struck out on my own. I had a translator in Iraq named Abood. He looked like Geppetto, and even though he was pushing 60 years old, he kept up with us on long patrols. He helped me navigate the worst of our deployment. In 2007, Shia militiamen came to his house, left a severed dog's head at his door, and told him that he and his family were next because they worked with Americans. So Abood and his family fled Iraq to Jordan, and I began working to get them to the United States. Enter my Exeter classmate, Cindy Chang. At the time, she was working at the State Department. Her job was to liaison with the Senate, so she invited me to Capitol Hill. I put on my uniform, and we went knocking on doors. The last office we visited was Senator Ted Kennedy's. He wasn't there. We left our contact information, and we left feeling dejected that we had failed at our mission that day. And I'll never forget this moment. We got in our cab. Cindy checked her BlackBerry, and she had a message from a woman named Janet Cayugutan in Senator Kennedy's office saying, "Is this the same Cindy Chang who helped Senator Kennedy's constituents get out of Beirut when Israel attacked last year? Senator Kennedy believes he owes you a favor." Senator Kennedy, the lion of the Senate, the brother of President John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy, a personal hero of mine, owed my classmate Cindy Chang a favor. At Cindy's request, he invited me to testify before the Senate, and legislation was soon passed creating a special immigrant visa saving thousands of Iraqi and Afghan translators. Aboud and his family made it safely to the United States, and now his daughters are doing well. One is an officer in the NYPD, another is joining soon, and the third is studying to be a nurse. Unfortunately, we lost Aboud a few years ago to cancer, but I was able to be by his side to his last breath. And they are a great and remarkable American family. There's also times when I feel that I failed. My film, for example. As soon as I left the Marine Corps, I decided I was going to be a filmmaker. I don't encourage you all to do that. Within a few years, Al Anbar, where I'd fought, had gone from the most violent part of Iraq to one of the safest parts of Iraq. And I felt that there was a story there that needed to be told. When I was there, we took actions, we acted with a heavy hand, we created more enemies than we defeated. And after I left, within a few years, the Marine Corps started realizing we don't need to fight everybody. Some of the folks who are fighting us are actually fighting us for good cause. Some of them are Al-Qaeda, they're not reconcilable, we can only fight them. But there are others who are nationalists, there are others who are fighting us for tribal reasons, there are others who are fighting us because somebody's paying them to fight us. And there are others who are fighting us because we killed a family member of theirs. And those people, those groups deserve to be heard. And so Marines started reaching out and doing the hard work of listening, assuaging grievances, and building alliances with former enemies to fight Al-Qaeda. I thought this was an important story that needed to be told, capturing those hard-earned lessons and ensuring that we never repeated the mistakes of my deployment. But I made a mistake of trying to do everything myself. I wrote the film, I produced the film, I directed the film. And the truth is, as painful as this is to admit, it's not a very good film. I'm actually sort of blessed that more people haven't watched it. Perhaps if I built a team, found a world-class director and writer to work with, things would have turned out differently, and maybe some of those lessons would actually be remembered. It's no wonder that when I look at one of my proudest achievements, Headstrong, I'm one of 5 co-founders. Success has many fathers. About 5 years ago, I grabbed beers with my former battalion commander in New York City, and he had a worried look on his face. We just had a terrible suicide in our battalion. A former sergeant came home, said hi to his wife and kids at the dinner table, went upstairs and killed himself with a gunshot to the head. My battalion lost 33 Marines in combat. We've now lost 23 to suicide. For too many, it can feel impossible to deal with the survivor's guilt that you came home and a better man. In my case, a man named Ronnie Winchester did not come home. Or to live with guilt and shame that you made a decision in combat that led to an old man with faulty brakes and poor eyesight dying by the side of the road because you mistook him for a suicide bomber. Or the grief knowing that you'll never see your fallen buddies again. We started the Headstrong Project to provide the world-class care without cost or bureaucracy that veterans need to return home, heal their hidden wounds, and get back to the best version of themselves. We treated our first veteran almost exactly 5 years ago in New York, and today we've expanded to 8 additional cities. We've also shown that if you have the courage to get help and you get the right help, and it's our job at Headstrong to make sure it's the right help, you can absolutely recover from trauma. One of my co-founders is a remarkable man named Gerard Ilaria. Gerard started his career as a therapist working for the Gay Men's Health Crisis, providing treatment to gay men and their partners with HIV. And while he was doing this, running groups, providing therapy to men, many of whom would die within 3 to 6 months, in the midst of all of this, he was coming home each night and taking care of his partner who was also dying of AIDS. In the midst of his own personal tragedy, Gerard was going to work every day to help other gay men through their traumas. And now through Headstrong, he's caring for hundreds of veterans. I grabbed coffee recently with one of these vets, a Navy SEAL, the last guy you could ever imagine going in for mental health care treatment, multiple combat deployments, total badass. And he said to me, you know, the remarkable thing about Gerard, what it's like for you and me to walk around Arlington National Cemetery, that's what it's like for Gerard to walk around the city. He knows people that died in every building, on every block. That's how bad the crisis was at the time. He knows people who lived and died all over the city. And the fact that he is who he is today, this is what the SEAL told me, gives him hope because he's such an example of what he could become. Any success we've had at Headstrong is largely due to Gerard's and the rest of our clinical team's compassion, professionalism, and deep knowledge of mental health. I'm just a guy who's lucky enough to work with them. I want to leave you with one last story about one of my friends who's buried in Arlington National Cemetery, Captain John Maloney. He was one of my instructors at the Marine Corps Infantry Officer course. It was late one night. We'd had a grueling exercise, grueling hike. We were tired and exhausted, sitting around on our packs, rifles in hands. And Captain Maloney came up to us because he saw this as a teachable moment. And he asked us, what comes first, your mission or your Marines? All of us at that school knew that we were soon headed off to war. We'd soon be leading Marines into battle. And that we'd have to make that type of decision as to whether the mission came before our Marines' lives. After some discussion, most of us came to an agreement. The mission had to come first. We're Marines. That's what we do. We accomplish the mission. Someone asked Captain Maloney what he thought. You take care of your Marines, he said. They'll take care of the mission. I'm fortunate that in my life, I found myself surrounded by remarkable people with vital missions. You're surrounded by people like that today at Exeter. People like Erin, Adnan, Brian Jones, and Cindy Chang, and when you go out into the world, you'll find others, people like Gerard and Tony Alvarado and Alex Martina. They are the real owners of this ward, and I'm grateful to know them, so thank you.